Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pär Johansson. I'm from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. And I would like to continue with what Aleksandra told us about just now with the case study in Sweden and how the Swedish EPC database and the control system is built up. So I will give you a short introduction to the legislation in Sweden, what data is entered into the database, how it's entered and how it's checked, the validation procedure of this data. What is special with the Swedish case is that we mainly use the operational energy use, and that's the measured energy use. So we measure the energy use for 12 months instead of calculating it for the building. And this has been done since the EPCs were introduced in 2006, as Aleksandra mentioned. And what's also done is that the energy use has to be corrected to normal use during a reference year. So the correction for the reference year is done by using the average temperature during the year and using the energy index method to correct the energy use for the specific year that we have measured to a more common procedure or common energy use for an average reference year. The correction for the normal use is not standardized at the moment, but it's made more or less differently depending on who is entering the data. So here we have standardization methodology, standardized methodology, which is under development right now, and that will be implemented during this year, hopefully. So the energy that is collected to the database is the measured energy use, which is basically the heating from electricity or other sources. And the energy demands are different based on if it is electricity or other energy use. So it's mainly energy for heating, cooling, ventilation, domestic hot water, and the facility electricity, which is considered for the EPC database. And the database is connected to several other sources of information. We have the Land Surveying Institute or the cadastral data from Lantmäteriet, which is used to really check that the correct address and building information is given to the database, so it's the correct building which is assigned to the correct energy use. We have the weather data from the Meteorological Institute, and we also have the register of certified energy experts, so that there is an actual certified energy expert entering the data, of course. And up to date, the database consists of 600,000 buildings, which have been entered into the database. And the main source of information is from when the building is sold, when the EPC has to be issued, or it's also issued after 2 years after commissioning. This is, I think, the case for most countries in Europe. And the validity of the EPC is 10 years. So the information in the database, basically information on the property is entered. It's the location of the property, the region, the municipality, the name of the property number, the address, of course, and also the heated floor area. And this can be quite tricky to find the information. It should be measured on the actual location, but it's not always done like that. It's taken from other registers, like from the property register. So this is something which is a bit of a trouble right now to validate. And the measured energy use for 12 months is not corrected for the reference year. It's the actual data which is measured during 1 year. So this should be corrected in the software or in the database automatically. The energy use should also be allocated based on the heat source. If it is district heating, if it is a wood fire stove somewhere in the building or the property, if it's heated by electricity, for instance by a heat pump or direct electricity, this should also be entered into the database, so we know which kind of heating is used and the distribution of the different heating sources. And to also know the heating, the domestic hot water energy use for heating up the hot water should also be entered, and also information on the household electricity and the facility electricity should be entered. Of course, if you have a building heated by electricity, we need to know how much is actually going to the heating of the building itself and not to the household appliances or to the facility electricity. And additional data which is collected, it's a lot of information available which should be collected with certain intervals. There is a mandatory ventilation check which should be done in all buildings with a ventilation system. So this information should be there if this mandatory ventilation check has been done or if it has not been done. The type of the ventilation system is also supposed to be entered. If it's a exhaust air ventilation or if it's exhaust and supply ventilation with heat recovery, for instance, this information should be entered. If there is air conditioning system in the building, this should also be entered. And there is also information on the radon concentration, which should be supplied to the database. So there's a lot of information available on the ventilation system and on the performance of the building envelope in regards of radon. Information should also be given on the energy efficiency measures, which has been done or are proposed by the energy expert. So during these 10 years, one energy efficiency measure could be done. So when it's time to do the next update of the energy performance certificate, this should be mentioned in this EPC as a proposed or performed energy efficiency measure, of course. When this data is collected, a PDF is created where all the data is visible. So the address and the building ID and the EPC ID is visible. The energy class should be presented. And also the heating system is presented already on the EPC PDF. It is possible to update the EPC, but this is seldom done within the 10 years validity. Since it's issued when the building is sold, this happens often more rarely than every 10 years, and there is no need to update it before these 10 years. And in some cases, when the building is sold before 2 years after commissioning, the asset energy use or the calculated energy use can be used, but this is only used in some few cases, around 4%. And in those cases, it's normally the as-built energy use which is provided to the EPC database. And the compliance with the Article 18, which was described by Aleksandra previously, there is a demand on the energy expert that he or she should be independent, which means that he should not have an interest in the building or that he should in no way be related to the building owner or being involved in other affairs with the building owner. And of course, he should not be commercially, economically, or in other ways dependent on the building owner if there is a risk to compromise the EPC, since there is a lot of different judgments in the allocation of the different energy sources built into this system. And at least 1% of the EPCs are selected for checking every year. And this is done by checking the energy use, how that corresponds to the energy use legislations, the domestic hot water distribution and distribution for facility electricity, and the number of electrically heated buildings and how they are presented in the database. This is also checked. And all this checking is done by Boverket, which is the Swedish National Board of Housing, Building and Planning. And some good and bad experiences. This database is accessible by almost everyone, the general public. Researchers and public authorities have full access, but there are some privacy limitations. So more or less all the data can be used and is used by several researchers to evaluate the building stock in Sweden and how to make it more energy efficient. Direct access to the database is only given to departments of the municipalities and some government agencies. So the database is anonymized, and the buildings cannot be identified when the database is sent out to other users. So bad experiences could be that the correct data or correct identification of the property or where the property is located is not always possible. It could be a block of buildings, for instance, where the energy use is measured for the entire block, and you don't know exactly how much is used for each building in that block. And also the correction for the normal use is, of course, quite complicated. But as I said, there is a standardized methodology which is being developed right now. So there is work going on to standardize this normalization procedure so that it gets more a common procedure among all of the energy experts. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention and hand over the floor to next speaker, or the